All right, everybody, welcome back to RCT Creations for this RCT Construction episode over here at Houston Pleasant today, over in Cypress, Texas. New coaster for 2013. As you can see, we're March 2nd, year one. I'm actually going to pause so we don't go too far. We're starting out with a fresh set of cash, $750,000, which is what we start the season with every year at both Joyland and Houston Pleasant. So we're starting off fresh with a new date. So we are at the very, very beginning of the 2013 season. We are going to go ahead and head over to this corner of the park. As you can see, we have a couple areas already marked out, and we are going to go ahead and get kicked off with the build for Houston Pleasant's 2013 edition, which will be a B&M inverted roller coaster. So this is kind of right on the edge of the era where, B&M's kind of heading into their new age of design. So there's a couple, I would say, unique features that the modern inverts feature that the older ones do not. For instance, the absence of pre-drop, so this ride will not have a pre-drop on it. And then just kind of, I would say, a little bit more spaced out elements, but it's really not that way with this particular ride. So we're going to go ahead and get kicked off here. Let's get the colors set up, and the theme for this ride, much like with the 09 edition to Funland, we are going to go with the Kingman. So this is just kind of a more modern iteration of that particular ride. So we're going to go ahead and get kicked off with it. So we have our initial start there. We have our station in place, and we're going to get kicked off with a 4-mile-an-hour booster out of the station into a right-hand turn into our lift hill, which is going to be set to a pretty quick speed of 7 miles an hour. So again, this is a modern B&M. The first, I would say, I guess you could count the two hypercoasters as modern B&Ms. Yeti Trail kind of featured the old school design, but this is definitely heading into the new era. But the story with Yeti Trail was, we had a coaster that had feature or was pre-designed, and they chose a different design off the gate, and then we went back and modified it. But for this one, we are going straight up with a new design. So we are heading up to 160 feet, and we are going to stop there for the time being and get the brake run built up properly. So there is our height. Let me make sure I can see through here. And we're going to do the same see-through vegetation on here. Again, as always, I do have a pre-built design in another world that I am referencing for this build to make sure I don't waste too much of your time, because let me tell you, this is probably the 5th iteration that I've had for this ride. And it gets very annoying very quickly. So we have a 4 brake there, and that is a block. And then we have 2 spaces and then a booster section that is set to 4 miles per hour. After that, we have another straight track piece into our second block brake. So we are able to stack 2 trains on the back end here. And that means we are going to run with 3 trains. So we're going to go back here again, do another set of booster. And again, when I do these builds, the boosters are meant to be kind of the drive tires. Since drive tires aren't featured in game, I want something to kind of act as those. So that's what we are going with here. So you'll never see them go horribly fast. And then right here we have a 4-mile-an-hour brake and a 9-mile-per-hour brake. And then beyond that, we're going to go straight, and we're going to bank into a downward helix, or upwards going backwards, I suppose, into kind of our preset here, where we have another block brake. And this one is going to be set to 9 miles per hour. And then we are going to have a few other sets of brakes here just to make sure we slow the train down heading into kind of the transfer track. So you could really consider this to be kind of the trim brake of the ride, where it slows it down enough, but it's not too much. So we're going to do a 9-mile-per-hour brake, 2 18s, and a 22. And then that will, for the most part, end our brake run. We'll do 2 more pieces there, and that is where our brake run catwalk will end. So there's kind of your initial kickoff of the new Kingman here at Houston Pleasant. I'm going to clear a little bit of this foliage out of the way just so we can see a little bit better. When I did the design, I cleared out a lot more than I think I had to. So I'm going to try to keep a lot of it. This area is where the queue and station will end up being. We have Ice River Run over here, and this ride will affect the restricted area fence, or the ride fence, for Ice River Run, just so we can have a little bit more space for queuing and all that fun stuff. With it being in Houston and kind of living in that area now, I can tell you it gets really, really hot, so the majority of the queue for the Kingman is going to be indoors. Unlike what we did for Trailblazer, where you just kind of wait under shaded tents outside. I can imagine guests complaining about that quite a bit, so we're going to go ahead and try to correct that right now. I'm going to clear some foliage right here. As you can see, we have an area over here marked, and I will get to that momentarily. I would like to do this before I start the main build, just so it can go nice and smooth, but real quick, let's go ahead and get the transfer tracks placed as well, so we don't have to worry about that either. I do like something a small detail I really like about OpenRCT2 now, and I can't sing this game's praises enough with the additions that the team has made, but the fact that these, when you do the pre-builds now, it has real colors of actual inverted coasters. So this would be the Batman colors. Banshee is one of them, and I think Montu is the third. It's either Montu or Osiris over at Park Asterie. I can't remember which one it is. Could be both. But I know Banshee, and this is obviously Batman. So we're going to do our drive tire there. 3 after that. So we're going to do a 5-tile transfer just to make sure all 8 cars fit. And this is actually going to be... You have to give me a second to think on what this color scheme is, because it's a real-life coaster and it's on the tip of my tongue. I want to say Great Bear, but that doesn't sound quite right, because I think Great Bear has silver supports. And then there's the Banshee color scheme right here. And this ride does use a little bit of inspiration from both Banshee and Osiris, as well as a little bit of extra from one of my favorite inverted coasters, Afterburn at Carowinds. I would say that's probably my favorite invert. So I think for the transfers, I usually do black and gray. On this ride, it's not going to particularly matter a whole lot, because most of the transfer will be, all the transfer supports are going to be visible. This is going to be another custom support ride. So we're starting with the live comm. We'll do the layout. I count the transfer tracks as part of the layout, so we'll go with that. And let's get this fixed. So no 9 cars, we're going for 8 cars. There's only one inverted coaster that runs with 9 cars, and it really doesn't even run with 9 cars, as only 8 of them have, only 8 of the cars allow for passengers, but there's a 0 car on front, and that would be Alpengeist over at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. For this one, rather than go with, I originally went with purple restraints for it to match Kingman at Joyland, but I wanted to do something a little bit different, maybe a little more sinister with this one, and go with kind of the red style over the shoulders. I originally was thinking about, so this would be off topic, I guess not really off topic, but this would be an inverted coaster that would feature vest restraints. I know someone had asked that about Yeti Trail over at Funland. Yeti Trail is kind of the tail end. Whoopsies. Yeti Trail is the tail end of what would be considered a classic invert, in my opinion. So that one would feature the hard over the shoulders, and this would feature the vest restraints. Reason being is that this is a more modern invert, so it would have a wider, I think the Banshee style invert has a wider track gauge, and I think Monster at Wally Gator also features the hard over the shoulder, just because it features the classic track gauge and then the older style trains. And if you're wondering, for anyone that's curious what track gauge means, it just means the basically it means the width or style of the track. So if you look at a ride like the big B&M dive coaster, something like Yukon Striker versus Iron Menace, Yukon Striker definitely features the wider gauge B&M track and the larger trains, whereas Iron Menace would feature some of the narrow gauge track. Okay, so beyond that, we're going to need to show all operating modes, which is already enabled. It probably shouldn't be, but you know me, got to be a little bit crazy. First incline launch. Oopsies, not finances. And reverse incline launch. Always do wait for full load, just in case I accidentally hit the button to open all rides. And then the inspection window we want to be set to never. And for clarity, the reason we're setting the full loads only, if I accidentally open all the rides, I do not want this one to start and move off the track, because it will if you haven't reverse incline launch shuttle mode. So this is transfer 1. This one will be transfer 2. And this will be transfer 3. When you're doing your transfer tracks, I tend to go, whoopsies, a little bit more in detail on the transfer tracks. With B&M coasters, you're gonna, most cases, 99% of the time, you're gonna have enough transfer spots to fit all trains. There's an exception to that, and that would be Thunderbird over at Holiday World, which does not have 2 transfers to the 2 trains it runs. At least I don't think so. Anything I've seen, I've been there a few times, and I have not seen a spot where you could store the second train on a transfer. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it could fit in that shed, but I just don't think it would. It doesn't look like it would. Whoopsies. That is not what I meant to do. I want to copy that and then paste that there. And then let's just check to make sure it's transfer 1, transfer 2, transfer 3. Perfect. And then let's go ahead and give the test to make sure that they do indeed work. And they do. Perfect. So our transfer tracks work. And the reason we do the extra track piece is if you take away this one, it looks like it's really close to on the edge there. Okay, so there are our transfers. Now let's go ahead and do a little bit of terraforming before we hop into the layout here. So we're going to do a little bit of cutaway view, just so I make sure I get this correct. Again, using the reference of the build. And we're going to go ahead and get kicked off here. I'm going to want to see height marks on land for this just to make sure I have everything correct. So all the land we want to be at 5 feet. And those are all at 5. Perfect. And just like that. So this is one of those things where if I get this wrong, I'm really going to pay for it later. So I really want to make sure I get this right. So we have 5 feet there on either end, and we'll start, make sure I have the right angle on both of them, and I don't, so I'm glad I checked that. So here we go. So we're going to start right on this side here. So we're going to go down to 0. I think we'll go to 0 everywhere it's necessary. So all this dirt area is going to be down to 0. And then right here is going to be 0, and this is going to be -5. These are also going to be -5. And those are going to go to -10. And that's going to be flat. This is going to go to -15, like so. And these are going to just keep basically stair-stepping down until we get to the spot we like. Oopsies, what am I missing? Oh no, I didn't realize you could hit spots that are outside the cutaway view. That's kind of annoying. Well, hey, now I know to be careful. So let's fix that. And that's all going to end up being modified as well, but still, we want to make sure we're on target. So be a little bit extra careful, me, when it comes to that. So I think I'll just lower all this and I'll raise that side back up when we get to it. Okay, so then this is going to be at -20, and this is going to go down to -25. Right there, and that is as low as that side will go. And these just basically keep stair-stepping down. So that's an even keel, and then we're down there. Oops. There you go. And then right here, we're going to dive down to -30. And we're going to turn it around. And again, we're going to make sure we have the correct angle here, so I'm on the right spot with both, so I can see properly. So we want right here, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, this is the angle we want. Okay. Then we'll go back to cutaway view. And now what we're going to do here is we want this to go down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we want this to have 5 flat. Just like that. And then we're going to angle back up on the 6th. So that would make it 7 total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that is perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Perfect there. Then on this side, we're going to start going back up. And then we're going to go even here. We're going to be a little bit careful on this side to make sure we have everything proper. And then here. Let me just raise this up just so I know I don't miss it. We're doing it. So there's that. This angle's to -15. These are at -10. This goes up to -5. Like so. And these should be at 0 and then -5. Just like that. So that is our angle there. Take a guess for, if you're watching this, take a guess for what portion of the ride you think is going to go through this part. If you listen to the inspirations for this ride, it should be, I would hope, fairly obvious, but you never know. Some of you guys, I'm sure, don't go to parks and ride coasters all the time and just enjoy RCT, which is perfectly fine. I used to be that way, but I fell in love with roller coasters. Really expensive hobby, unfortunately. I renewed my Six Flags pass the other day, and that was not cheap, and I'll leave it at that. Okay. So again, we're just going to do a little bit of terraforming around the outside. I want at least a 2 wide base around the entire thing. And we'll just raise all this up until it lines up over there. Just like that. Perfect. And then this will raise up as well. Just to give us a little bit more even terrain for the coaster on the other side. And something you'll see me add later, with this being Houston and with hurricanes being a problem here, we're going to build a little pond right here to, if we would need to pump water out of this area, because that will, believe it or not, be a problem here. Let's get a few more details done. We want to make sure we get rid of trees too. You don't want roots growing up around this stuff, because that would be not ideal. That would definitely mess up your retaining wall. So you want to get rid of any trees that are anywhere close to this, and I think that should be pretty good right there. And then what we'll do is we'll coat the outside just to make it look like the retaining wall is concrete as opposed to dirt. Just a small detail thing that I think makes all the difference. And then we'll put the retaining wall on this side, just like so. And there's that. And we'll do the actual pond itself in the time lapse, just because it's going to take a long time. I don't want to waste your time on the live come with that, because it's just going to add a lot of extra time. So there is our trench right there. And we are ready to continue with the layout. All right. So this is something I typically don't do. A lot of people will do this for hyper coasters. I tend to avoid that, but what we're going to do is we're going to go into one of these drops, the large flat to steep. Let me make sure I have my height tracks on, because I have done these builds before and then messed something up and had to restart. And I really don't want to do that, but if I have to, not the end of the world. So this will go down to -115. We're going to start to level out a little bit so you get a nice whip down the drop here. And this is definitely Osiris Banshee based. Again, no pre-drop. It's a modern inverted coaster. We're going to go down to 100 feet. And then we're going to do these wide turns here. So it kind of steepens out. At first, I wasn't sure how this would look, but I think once the layout was done, it actually looks pretty good with all the custom supports and all that fun stuff. So especially when it comes to custom supports, excuse me, I'm definitely going to have to clear out some of the foliage around this area, and then we're going to have to clear out a little bit over here as well. But I'm going to try to limit the amount I do so I don't have to clear out too much, because as I mentioned, I would like to keep a lot of it if I can. So we're going down to 20 feet on this. We're going to have a valley right there. Make it a nice intense drop, and then we're going to go up 2 straight, and then we're going to go to our dive loop other direction. We want to go dive loop right. Now we'll be at 125 feet, like so, and then we're going to do a large half loop left. That's medium. There we go. Large half loop left, just like that. And then we are going to go down to 25 feet. We're going to do a valley that is 3 regular pieces. And then we're heading up into our vertical loops. We're going to head up to 40 feet. One of the original designs I had, I wanted the loop to wrap around the lift hill. I got it to wrap around the lift hill, but I just didn't think the flow of the layout was very good. So I decided to stick with this. I think this works fine. And then it makes it a little bit less difficult when I do the catwalk around the lift. Especially with the invert needing an extra tile of clearance or an extra 5 feet of clearance. It'll make this just a little bit easier. After that, we're going to drop down to, once again, 25 feet. We're going to do a valley of 2 pieces. And then we're going to do a little bit of a unique element. So this is going to be an airtime hill up to 100 feet on an inverted coaster. So Patriot at Worlds of Fun does something like this, and I think it works out fairly well. It doesn't deliver a bunch of airtime, but it works out. And then Flying Fox, which just opened this year over at Kentucky Kingdom, does airtime on an invert very, very well, and I wanted to feature that on this ride. So we'll do that. I'm going to leave an extra piece of banking here, which is something I did not do in my build, but we're going to do it here anyway. Or did I? Disregard, I did. I planned ahead. Now we're going to drop down to 10 feet. So we're getting lower and lower. And the nice thing is the land over here kind of valleys a little bit. So that helps. And then we're going to do a 3 valley. And then in this 3 valley, we are going to put a trim brake. And we're going to set it to 67. So really it doesn't do anything. Just kind of a little, again, little detail piece that really doesn't need to be there. But I think adds just that little extra touch of realism. Most B&Ms do have a trim brake, so when the computer detects the ride's going too fast, it will enact it to slow it down a little bit, so the Gs aren't too much. So we're going to put a trim brake there, and maybe I'll turn it on, maybe I won't. I haven't decided yet. In the build, I did not, so I would wager I probably will not. We're going to go up to 15 feet here, and then rather than doing the dive loop that we started with, we are going to do an Immelman over here. And then we want this to go to the right, to the left. So we want another large half loop left up to 95 feet. And then we're going to do our dive loop to the left as well. And then beyond that, we're just going to go ahead and level out down to 30 feet. Now, originally I did have this go further down and it made the turn at the base of this valley really, really tight. And I didn't really want that. So we're going to go ahead and leave it level. We're going to raise it up a little bit. Do a wide turn, like so. And now we're going to go ahead and start heading up into our 0G roll. So we're going to go up to 65 feet from here. And then we want it to the right. So we want this turn to kind of level out and then go into the 0G roll. So really, if I were to really build this, I'd probably leave this slightly banked and have this be mostly an elevated turn into the 0G roll so it flows really smooth into it rather than whipping. And again, that's a case where maybe old school B&M would have done a little bit more whip, but modern B&M would not. Now we're going to dive down to 40 feet. And now this is probably my favorite element on this whole ride. I love the way this ended up looking and turning out. And this really was kind of the basis. Originally, I had this drop over on this portion show after this airtime hill. You went straight into this, but I ended up moving it and adding 2 more inversions ahead. So we're going to go into our corkscrew to the right, up to 65 feet, and now we're going to do a large half loop left down through here. And this is going to drop down to, I can still do my cutaway view. It's going to go down to minus 25 feet. And then down here, what we can do is put the on-ride photo section right there. And then we're going to go back up. However, with this having 2 drops, we want this I used to do this where these would both be the same height, both large loops would go to the exact same height. However, in recent times, I don't really want that, so we can keep the pacing a little bit better. So we're going to go up to 60 feet on this one, so only one elevation piece heading out of this. We can go ahead and get rid of that. And this actually makes me feel a lot better because it means I did it correctly, because it fits. So after the batwing element, we're going to go ahead and head over this way. So this is where the Banshee and definitely Afterburn takes effect here with this batwing element. Afterburn, this is probably my favorite. This and the Alpengeist Cobra Roll are two of my favorite, and I give the Afterburn batwing in row 8 the edge. It's just so intense, and it whips you so hard. I love old school B&M for that. This one gives a little bit of whip, but probably not too much to keep it somewhat more mild. But beyond that, we're going to drop down to 10 feet. Do a valley of 2. And now we're going to angle up into our second non-inversion element of the ride. So we're going to do an upwards helix. So this will go up to 55 feet. Turn around and then drop back down. And I love these diagonal bank turn pieces. It just adds so much more dimension to what you can do in this game. Then we're going to do a little bit of an S-bend coming out of the helix in this direction. And then once that S-bend is done, we're going to drop down to the 15-foot mark. And this will lead us into our last inversion, which is going to be a corkscrew at 40 feet in height. And then beyond that, we're going to follow a little bit of a flight deck pattern. So we're going to drop into our corkscrew, and then we're going to do a helix. And this isn't even something I realized that flight deck did until literally just this moment. Like, I know the ride does this, but I never made the connection. So a little bit of flight deck inspiration too. That was completely unintentional. So now we're going to head up back to 40 feet, do an upwards helix. And now we can level it out to 35. Another little bit of an S-bend here, and we're going to drop down to the 5-foot mark. And then we're going to rise back up to that 35-foot mark, and that will complete our layout. So layout is done, and transfer tracks are built. Let's go ahead and hop into the fitting out process, get the station, and get it all detailed, and we'll head to the custom supports right now. All right, and we're going to go ahead and start off by beginning work on the station here. So there's a little bit of, and by a little bit, I mean there's a lot of terraforming going on with this ride. It took a lot to get this one done. Reason being, in the design build, with the way custom supports work, you know, there's certain heights that they just don't quite mesh with the ground and the way they connect. And this one, in the past, especially with Yeti, I was pretty bad about just not having them connect vertically. But in this one, I kind of was a little more liberal with that. So we have some of that. But a lot of them, I would modify the land so they connected at the diagonal angle. And then with the station, there's a lot of work to do here too. I usually don't do the full station in the design build, but for this one I did, because I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like and where I wanted the transfers to sit. So I wanted to make sure it all fit fairly well. And I think it did with this particular build. A lot of queue for this one, a lot of indoor queue, as I mentioned in the live com portion. I'm recording this part 2 days later, I want to say. It's really bad that I don't remember when I did the live com portion of this to finish out the layout, but I think it's about 2 days later. A lot of indoor queue. This is a queue I would want to be air conditioned, especially being, you know, in the Houston area now. It gets very, very warm, especially during the summer, and you really don't want your guests suffering through that. So the Kingman at Houston Pleasant has a little bit of outdoor queue, but the vast majority is inside. And with it being inside, the overflows in there are always going to be open. So I'm not just going to see through the scenery to unselect the overflow queue in here. It's just, for the most part, always going to be open. I might change my mind on that later, but I don't know. We'll find out, and I probably won't even keep you guys updated on it. It's probably just something I'll do in the background that you might find later on when I eventually share these parks. We're already at the 2013 season. This is kind of crazy to think about as we're building the station here in the background. We started in 1970 with Funland, and we're heading to modern day, and we're getting very, very close. The benefit we have right now, I'm gonna move my microphone a little bit. Sorry if it makes extra noise, but the benefit now is that the coasters are much more detailed than building the arrows with the classic support structure. The wooden supports that they have in game is detailing. Wooden coasters are fairly easy to detail as well. The benefit to these massive B&Ms and the Intamins that are eventually going to come. The support structure on Intamin coasters is especially brutal, and I'm looking forward to the final product, but I'm not looking forward to the process to get there. But you could consider that maybe a little teaser to the fact that there may or may not, but definitely are Intamin coasters coming in the future to this series. The B&Ms though, uh, crowd pleasers, they do their job very well. I know they kind of got a reputation for a while there when Cedar Fair was using them as being the boring and milds. But something you have to keep in mind as an enthusiast is, you build the coasters for the general population because you want the general population to enjoy them. And a ride like Gatekeeper, a ride like Banshee, I mean, Banshee's pretty intense, but a ride like Gatekeeper that's not horribly intense, but is still very tall and does a lot of crazy cool things. The general public are going to love that. And I think the Kingman here is one of those rides as well. Um, has a very good. I think the theme for this one is the best of the three Kingmans. I don't know. Maybe Joyland takes the title there because you have the whole fenced in or castle walled in area. But this one I think does a really good job as well to kind of set the tone and the more sinister side. That's why I wanted to do Dragon's Breath to have it not be on the sinister side. But the theme for this one again goes back to the Kingman, crazy king that, if the population disagreed or spoke out against, they would tend to vanish. So it started out at Joyland, and then the story continued to Funland, where the population overthrew the king. But with this one, the theme kind of continues that just because you overthrow one doesn't mean another one's not going to pop up. So it basically the cycle repeats itself, and now we have a bigger inverted coaster with the same theme. Take that. I try not to reuse themes for the most part, but I think especially for the Fun Corporation, where you have a park in Albany, New York, you have a park in Sacramento, California, you have a park in Jacksonville, Florida, and especially for Houston Pleasant, you have a park over in Cypress or Houston. The parks are just so spread out. When you have like Six Flags that has a Batman the Ride everywhere, I think that starts to wear thin a little bit. But with these rides, I think it works, especially if you put the effort in. And I won't lie, Six Flags in the Batman era did put a lot of effort into those rides. If you've been to Great America, if you've been to Over Georgia, those rides do have a good amount of theme. Even the one at Great Adventure, I mean, walking through the Bat Cave into the station, very detailed and very well done, I would say. But as you can see there, we have the Kingman Castle finished, so the station there is done. Right now, we're going through and modifying the land and marking, where the footers will go for the custom supports. I like to mark where they go. So the custom supports are all done in the pre-build that I copy off of, just so this process is much smoother. And to kind of give you an idea, this is sped up to 1,000%. So the full build for this ride took probably about 7 hours. And that's just for the recreation of the original. So we have the layout portion, we have the station, we have the custom supports. And keep it in mind, this isn't all done in one sitting. I'll do portions of it, take a break, go to work, come back, and then we'll do another portion of it afterwards, maybe the next day. So I don't, every once in a while I'll sit down and do one in one sitting, but it's not common for me to do that. So it's usually spread out over a couple days. I messed up the land a little bit there, so I had to go back and fix it a little bit to make sure it lined up properly because I messed up one of the supports. And that's part of the reason some of this terraforming looks like a pain, or it is a pain, just because I'll mess it up and then I have to go back and redo it. But rather to find out early on and then build the whole thing and go, oh crap, things didn't line up. But my issue there was the that 2 plot of dirt there adjacent to that haunt queue line. It didn't match up the first time, so I knew I was off somewhere and I just had to find it. And I did, and we got it corrected. Again, a lot of terraforming going around here. Again, making sure all those supports line up. This little hump here is just to make sure the one of the lift supports comes in at a diagonal angle. It might not even be for the lift, it might be for the drop, but regardless, that just went up so the support connects at the diagonal angle as opposed to going diagonal and then becoming vertical. I don't like it when I do that, but sometimes it's unavoidable and you make it work. Just one of those small details that bugs me at the end of the day. Setting up a little bit more land there because we're going to relocate one of our flat rides into this section of the park. I didn't want the coaster to be over here by itself, especially if you brought families. Maybe you want a less intense ride to kind of help out. I'm familiar, one of my home parks, Adventureland, at least formerly home parks anyway, they did a really good job at setting up a big intense ride with a family ride next to it. So if you had younger kids and, you know, parents, grandparents, they could go ride one thing while the teens hopped on the massive ride that was next door. I kind of wanted to keep that tradition up here, so we set up a little thing here. Another park that did that fairly well, that did that very well actually, that I recall, Holiday World. When you go over to Thunderbird, there's another less intense flat ride next door that, you know, families can ride, and then Thunderbird's also not over there by itself. Because where Kingman is at Houston Pleasant, it's really kind of off by itself. There's it's on the haunt path. So there's two haunts that are just kind of chilling out by themselves on a branch, and I have extended where Kingman is off of that branch. So I wanted the ride not to be all by itself, because if you have one ride all by itself, the odds tend to be that some guests will not venture off the path to go find it. So you kind of want to give it more of a reason. I also ended up putting a food stand in the area, and we'll get to that eventually. So this area right here with the big tunnel there is actually intended to be kind of a drainage pond. I talked about it in the live com again, but I'll touch upon it again here. My goodness, I cannot speak. But if with hurricanes being a problem in this area, heavy rains, anything like that, if that tunnel were to flood, I wanted a little bit of a retention pond that if you had to pump the water out, you could pump it into this little retaining pond here so that you just had a place for that water to go so it wasn't in the way. Again, lots of specific terraforming here. I try to use the land tool when necessary, but the land tool is not as precise, and I'm not as good as using it in a precise manner, so I just did individual block by block. And then we'll mark where the supports are going to go over the water. Just gives a little bit of an extra dynamic to the ride as well, because it goes over water and not just above land. And then it has that underground tunnel, which in-game is not underground because I carved it out and just put scenery on top of it eventually, but it still gives the same effect, at least when it comes to visuals. Not necessarily in-game stats, but for visuals, it looks pretty good. Getting the ride marquee all set up. It took me a couple tries to get it lined up properly here, but this is one of my favorite marquees. Very boxy, but it just has the castle wall. I still think the one at Joyland has the best entrance marquee because it's built into the castle walls that go around King's Isle, the section of park there. Go ahead and take a look at the Kingman build for Joyland. That's an older one. Kingman at Joyland was the first B&M we did for the series. So that one's going to be a little bit older, but nonetheless, that one definitely by far has the best marquee of any ride I have built in this series. I think the Xenons are pretty good too, but the marquee for this one also looks really good. As you saw with the marquee, we have a Fun Pass queue as well. So we have the standby and then the Fun Pass. Fun Pass does not work. It's the upcharge. It's Fast Lane. It's Flash Pass. It's Express, whatever Disney calls it these days as well. Upcharge, guests can skip the long line, maybe wait in a shorter one. As you can see right now, we are just going through and placing footers to get them all set up. And again, makes it easier when you're actually putting up the custom support. So rather than, you know, we saw in the Kumba build where it took me 5 hours to do it. It still took me 5 hours to do it in the build portion. However, when it comes to doing this RCT construction, I have an idea of where all the footers are going to be. And it makes it way easier just to know what kind of support I want to use and plop where I need it. And it just kind of makes the whole process go back together fairly quickly. When it comes to the dive under for the batwing there, that one was still a little complex because we have some supports that just kind of grow out of the wall a little bit and then some that connect to the ground. But at the end of the day, it still looks really good. That was probably the most interesting part. And then we got to get these lined up for the transfer track. And if you look right here, I believe, yeah, this is before I corrected it. So I had the supports off, so I had to go back and fix it. then put the catwalks in, get that all set up. This transfer track, I think, ended up looking pretty good. Most B&M transfer tracks I try to hide so they're not open to the elements. This one, I did the opposite. Most modern B&M inverts don't have it covered. So a Patriot at Worlds of Fun does not have the transfer covered. Silver Bullet at Knott's does not have the transfer covered. Banshee, Kings Island doesn't have the transfer covered. So again, going off a very modern B&M design. Yeti Trail, I did hide the transfer tracks inside the building to give a little bit more room for storage maybe. But for this one, what I did was we had the open transfers. However, I did put up a maintenance shop towards the back of the park behind the ride that maintenance could, move the trains to and work on them there. It didn't end up coming in this build video, but at the end of the day, we do have that as well for the maintenance team to go work on. I've got the footers rising out of the water, which I think looks really good. I always get worried about how things are going to clip when it comes to this game, especially with the custom scenery and disabling clearance checks. But I think coming out of the water, those footers look really good and look fairly realistic as well. And then here's the building the custom supports underneath in the batwing cave. This process can be a little bit difficult because you don't have a lot of room to work with. However, using the cutaway view makes it a lot easier. And as you can see, those two supports right there, while the track's still sloped, are the ones that grow out of the wall. I kind of wish there was a footer or a connection piece you had that could go into the land so it didn't look like the support was just sticking out of the wall. But I think it still looks pretty good. And it will be hidden for the most part. You might be able to see pieces of it from underneath the tunnel, but for the most part, it won't be visible. And then working up for the custom supports here. Also in this build, as we go through, this is probably going to be the tail end of the commentary section. We'll switch over to just doing the support section because this is the part that takes the longest. Also in this build, we're going to put together a food stand. Again, another boxy building, not horribly fancy. Get the staff zoned for the area. And then also, I was checking through staff and noticed one of the mechanics was trying to fix the double drop falls transfer track. Pro tip, and I know I mention it every time, and I believe I even mentioned it in the live build portion of this video. If you do transfer tracks and you do it so you can store trains on them, like visually, I mean, you can't actually store trains, but just if you do the visual, make sure you set it so mechanics don't try to fix the transfer tracks, because they'll try to fix the transfer tracks and they won't actually fix any of your rides. So always go through and make sure that those are set to never when it comes to mechanics actually getting those built. But going through, getting this done, getting the food stand done. The rest of this video will be custom supports and a couple other small details. We're going to put a little bit of decoration in the queue. Some in that little corner there in the top right, we're going to put some graves and just some shrubs so it's not boring and broken. It's just not boring and empty. That's the terminology I was looking for. But we're just going to put some stuff there. It's a little bit of theming so that guests have something to look at as they're going through those endless overflows. Realistically, if you're watching this and you're mostly a scenario player, do not do those huge long queue lines. I do it to add a little bit of realism because at an amusement park, you look at any of the bigger regional parks, there's a ton of overflow. And this is a park that's definitely one of the bigger regional parks, especially now. I mean, just looking at the numbers, this park does phenomenally well for the Fun Corporation, at least in the numbers I end up getting. So we want to make sure that we have enough space for guests to get in line. And then this ride's also going to draw a lot of guests to the park as well. I believe the inverts get a pretty good amount. At least any of the Twister style coasters, the B&M style coasters get a pretty darn good build on the soft guest cap. And there's the Franken support right there. I couldn't get that one to go underneath without getting in the way of the ride in a way that looked good. So I did a very odd looking support. So I kind of took a little bit of Great Bear inspiration for that particular support there. But anyway, back to queue lines. Do not make a ton of overflow. Don't let the guests stack up, because if the guests are stacked up in a queue, that's less time in your scenario. And even in real life, that's less time guests have to be out in the park spending money on food, merchandise, or anything like that. One benefit you have, especially in the modern era of theme parks, if guests are waiting in queues like that, they might be more inclined to buy your fast lane, your flash pass, express, lightning lane, or Fun Pass is what it's called for the Fun Corp, but kind of gives you that. But one thing that can get really frustrating, and this is something that's fairly new, is these companies do not seem to stop selling them anymore. I remember back in the day when I'd go to Worlds of Fun on haunt weekends, they would sell out a fast lane. And that's not a thing that happens anymore. So you'll get Fun Pass, fast lane queues that reach an hour long. And if you're familiar with the industry, you may have seen that Cedar Point increased their all-season fast lane price from $1,000 to $2,000. So I did not renew through Cedar Point this year. I ended up going through Fiesta, Texas. Made it work a little bit better, and the fact that I'm closer to that park now. But worked out fairly well. Beyond that, we're kind of getting off topic with this ride. The rest of this build, as I said, is going to be putting together a food stand, zoning staff, and finishing the custom supports. Again, thank you all for tuning in to the Houston Pleasant Kingman build, and I will see you all in the next one. Enjoy some of the classic RCT tunes. I'll see you later.